Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Coffee and Open Source, a place to meet new friends, have some great conversations, and maybe learn something along the way. I'm your host, Isaac Levin. If you're enjoying the conversations here, be sure to like, subscribe, follow wherever you're watching or listening. Also, if you or someone you know would like to come out on the show and have a conversation with me, be sure to reach out to me on a social media platform. I have a lot of them. And the best way to find them is if you go to isaacl.dev, that'll give you a list of all the different places that you can find me. So with that, let's get started. I'm looking forward to my guest today. We were talking about all sorts of fun things, and I'm looking forward to continuing those conversations. So my guest today is Aravind Putrevu. Aravind, do you want to say hello and introduce yourself?
Hello, Isaac. Thank you so much for having this conversation. As usual, I'm really enjoying the chat all the time and really excited to be here to talk about open source. And the show title itself, uh, like intrigued me, like coffee and open source, both are very interesting to me. And shall I introduce? I mean,
Yeah. Introduce yourself any way that you see fit.
yeah, I would love to talk more and then share more, and then we continue the
Yeah, for sure.
conversation. I'm Aravind, and I work as a director of developer go-to-market or developer marketing at CodeRabbit. And currently, the company that I work for does AI code reviews. It's one of the very popular AI code brands out of there. But then in my career, I've done a lot of stuff that's around. I've been an engineer, worked on large-scale production engineering systems, to also on security systems like McAfee at McAfee, and then entrenched into open source and communities through meetups and other stuff, and eventually worked with Elasticsearch for quite some time, worked on the go-to-market and areas in APAC. Now I'm in Amsterdam, Netherlands. It's a beautiful place. Looking forward to engage and work with the developer community and uh, participate in the hype wave of AI.
Yeah, I think we're gonna talk a lot about AI, so I'm looking forward to it. But I first would like to start out with the how you got started story. So when did you realize that technology was the thing that you enjoyed and you wanted to be a part of it?
So I like building, if you ask me. And this is not, when I say building, doesn't mean that I build software systems, because I don't know what software is at that age. Like, this
Sure.
is probably in my teens. And then I love working on mechanical systems that doesn't
Yeah.
have it. Then I love really building on electrical systems, and then system that has some sort of, like, maybe wires and all of that. And then I find the science of engineering, or like, the entire working with the team really exciting. And naturally, when I saw the computer for the first time, I'm from India, and then I born and brought up in India, in the north coastal part of India, called a place called Vizag, very popular for its naval bases and things like that. So this nice beaches and all of that. So, but then I also got introduced to the computers a bit early in cycle, unusual for a lot of people. But then I think I got very early got introduced to computers due to my cousins and other people who were in the States, etc. And then super excited to always see what you could do with these little things. And then I felt like, I could build more stuff, and then all of those are not real, to be honest. And then I somehow enjoyed doing that. And I by the time I really uh, thought to choose my electives, or, like, my majors, I decided that I really want to do computer science. And that propelled me into many areas. I've never looked back. And then the origins in general, if you look at what made me choose technology over everything, I would definitely say it's like the continuous uh, thrill to build something and see someone, like, excited. And now I think maybe over the last few years, like, say, like 8 9 years, I started to love telling people, I mean, explaining things and telling the stories about these complex concepts, like how, it's like, you were talking about it, right?
Yeah.
So those are the things that keep me moving, and then I always find more interesting thing than, like, looking for probably a career ladder, right?
Yeah, no, it's funny because you and I have very, very similar I think we have similar backgrounds. We have similar interests, right? Obviously, I didn't grow up in India, but like the idea of like kind of being very curious and loving to tinker with things, and like in that, and kind of finding out that one of the things that you're really interested in is like the ability to teach and the ability to give back and help people learn. So one of the things that I love to talk about with folks, especially, that have that similar curiosity is like when you were growing up and like you first, like you figured out about computing, like, like, was there a point in time when there was something you wanted to like, at least in the US, they asked like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? I don't know if they have this have similar things in India. But was there something that you wanted to do before, or was it always working with computers?
Oh, well, I always thought I would want to do more contributions in like I said, building things around more mechanical systems.
Yeah.
And I always loved this area of building engines and things like that. Somehow, I don't know. I still have that feeling when I start to look at like, the IoT. I think that was like a hype wave
Yeah.
or yeah, that a lot many people worked at some point, or still it's like a cool thing. So I enjoy building these contraceptions, like wherein what do you call that, the things that has a domino effect, right, where you put a lot of things and then
Oh, like the Rube
it
Goldberg sort of thing.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So those things excite me, and then I've done a lot of those back in the day, and there were no phones or something, so I could record and probably post them on on internet. But then those were the things that excited me a lot, and somehow I got pulled into the technology, and then that made me stick around for longer. And to be honest, I never stayed more than 1.5 year um, in any one area that is like more centric to one specific technology or something. So
Sure.
it's always like what's new, what's exciting, and that also propelled me to learn new things first of all, and that also helped me grow in my career phenomenally, and in fact, actually, I should say exponentially, right? From where I started to work, I think from where I'm currently here, I think it's very different in terms of like the arc of launch. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you mentioned like the IoT slash like Raspberry Pi hype train. Like I think there was a point in time where if you didn't like try to build stuff on a Raspberry Pi, like you were behind the times. And now I have like all these Raspberry Pis that I have stuff on them, but I don't ever use them for like what they're originally purposed for, right? Like but I found it fascinating too. Like you have this small little board and you can do like literally anything on it. It's got a full operating system. You can have it plugged into sensors. You have to learn a little bit of the electrical pieces to it because you need to be able to, create circuits. That sort of stuff was super interesting to me. Um, Here's a fun question for you. Do you remember the first like program you wrote or like app you built?
So there was this, if I remember the programming language really right, this is this thing called Turtle,
Turtle.
and yeah, Turtle. And what it does is like it's a very small program, and I you could make shapes with it, and you could
Okay.
give in say RL60, like and then it takes a turn, and then it does a 60-degree angle, and then you can draw
Sure,
a line
sure.
or things like that. So those sort of things. I mean, I did something like that, and then after that, I remember vaguely like doing some DOS games and things like that. But then I don't know if speaking about them, I feel myself so old, and
Sure,
then
sure.
they are like quite a thing of past, and I don't know if people even realize them. There were computers which used to come up with MS-DOS only, no Windows,
Yeah, yeah.
and yeah. So I believe I was excited seeing a terminal, and then I think we are talking about React routers and other stuff right now. So quite crazy.
Yeah, no, it's pretty funny. Like, I love asking like like what's the first programming language question you learned because one I think that it dates people I can pretty much understand like how old you are like what age you grew up in technology based on like your first programming language. Like if you say your first programming language was like React, I'm like, okay, so you haven't been a developer for probably more than 10 years, right? Like, but if you say like, oh, my first programming language was Delphi or C++, I'm like, okay, so you probably have been programming for a long time. So yeah, I just find it funny. And then there's this whole like swath of folks that have learned to code like they learned like with Turtle or Game Maker was the one that I was introduced to at a young age, was like kind of like drag and drop similar things. And now there's like all sorts of different tools that do that sort of thing, Scratch and so on, which I think is great. I'd love to ask you this question too. It's like, when did you realize that it was there was like a life to make or a career to have with computer programming specifically? Was there like an epiphany, or was it because there's a lot of people around you that had that background, interest in technology, and they went into computer science? Was that kind of like a path that was kind of picked for you?
I would say there's a lot of that. Traditionally, I don't know how much you know about Indian culture in
Sure,
general. Like
sure,
there are quite a few engineers, as you could imagine, right?
sure. Yeah,
And
yeah,
then
yeah.
quite these companies, system integrators, not necessarily product companies, but then there are quite a few folks in this area. And then you see people from your own family or your cousins and other people, right, who try to move around and then, join these companies. So you naturally have, oh, they are a software engineer. What do they build? They build software. Oh, so that's great. But otherwise, what the second or most important thing that I noticed is I got introduced to web programming. And this is not again like the React type of stuff like HTML and then sockets and things like that. And these were days where where ActiveX and that sort of technologies were like super popular. Like
Sure.
it was that area, Dreamweaver. It's like a slightly a different area, and I can't even believe this one. So I got excited, like really. So you could build something, you could ship something, and then of course you need a public IP to host and let look at it, right? But then there's a way that you could build something, and that started to make me feel like you could build some solutions, CRUD apps, right? Simple CRUD apps that businesses could use,
Yeah.
and that's when I understood, oh, there's value in it. And then potentially if I join a company, I could contribute to do something, and that excited me. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean
So that
yeah, it's pretty fascinating. And yes, I'm familiar with the fact that, one of the key, opportunities in India is like in the software engineering computer science field. I just always think it's interesting because you talk to a lot of people, and some people, they kind of say it's like, okay, well, that's like the best option. So I know a lot of people that weren't initially very interested in computers, but they realize that it's a good way to kind of, make a career for yourself, make some money, all that sort of stuff, right? Which for me, as somebody who has kind of loved technology their entire life, like I can't imagine like a world where I wouldn't be working in technology. So it's just very fascinating to me.
I agree, right? I mean, that's pretty standard. Technology or like working in this area is very important, or like is kind of like an obvious choice for a lot of people in India. But that being said, for me, there are other options too. And
Yeah.
then I voluntarily chose this one, and I never repented back. And then I always enjoy, and I try to keep it at that level, like towards the edge, and I try to take more risks in choosing a profession. And that's what made me switch from somewhere to like more developer advocacy, more marketing. I don't know where it is going, but then I always want to learn new thing and then do stuff. So I think it keeps me on the edge for now.
Yeah, no, I mean that's great. And I think one too is like, I think some people, like, it depends on how, what's the best way to phrase this? It depends on how like curious you are as an individual. Because I think a lot of
Right.
people, like, I think people are curious until it becomes a bit challenging. And I say this to a lot of people that when they get started in tech, like, you have to be very curious, and you also have to be very patient, because there's lots of like things that you have to think about when you're building something or you're in technology. And if things don't work, you have to be very patient, because more than likely, it's probably not an easy solve, or it's an easy solve that has about 15 other things go wrong during the process. Um, Here's a good question for you. So when did you, you went to university, I'd imagine, right?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. So
Uh,
what were some other courses that you took when you were in university that you were interested in? And how did you kind of use the things you learned in those courses to kind of bring back to, your love of learning, and also like just the area of technologies that you're interested in?
okay, yeah, this is pretty interesting because Courses when it comes to the Western world, when you go to university, might not be big here, right? I mean, when you do your masters or even bachelors, right? You have a lot of assignments and all. But in India, there are quite a few courses, coding boot camps, and even now it has like exponentially grown into something very, very different. And you have a lot of these big tech companies who give great courses for free, which I would love to do even today. It was not there back in the day. I would want to say that surprisingly, I did not take so many courses, and
Sure.
because internet was quite helpful, and I was able to at least like watch a lot of videos, and YouTube was like really helpful even then. And then there were quite a few technical resources that are available on internet, and then I was able to learn more stuff. And then I think there's one course that I really remember doing. That's because my love for like more object-oriented programming, and then I want to also like get enterprise ready. I don't know what that means, but then
Sure, sure.
if I
What does
if I
enterprise
kind of
ready
like
actually mean, right? Like, yeah.
so I would say it's job ready, right? I think I would want to do an SCJP certification. It eventually, I think now, I hope it exists today, and then it's called something Oracle certified something. But then
Yeah.
at the time, it like SCJP, the Sun Certified Java Programmer, and then I want to definitely pick that up so that I have the badge, and then people probably would look for that. So I tried to do a course around the Java. It's called In-Depth Java, wherein you go and learn deeper internals of how the JVM works and what happens behind. And then that led me to expand on to work on several stuff, like different frameworks around Java, system design patterns. And then I also did quite a bit on C Sharp and .NET as well. I did learn and did use Visual Studio. Visual Studio was like so horrific on my. I would openly say that on my laptop, my Windows laptop at the time, it used to hog a lot of my memory and all.
Sure,
But
sure.
it was fun. I did build a lot of like good applications. From drag and drop. So it was really good. So I did not take a lot of courses, but then Java was one course that impacted a lot career wise. It did help me get a job as well. So and then it was I never looked back, but that was
Yeah.
one course that I would still remember.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating that like, you know, I to this day remember some courses I took in college that I shouldn't have. Like I remember like I took like a liberal studies class where we had to like read like these old books. And I remember stuff about these books like just because I don't know why they just resonate and they've stuck in my head for, I've been out of college for almost 20 years. And it's crazy to think of. It's crazy to think about it. Like um here I love to kind of get your thoughts too is like I think you and I we kind of grew up probably in the same time frame of technology, like we got into web 2.0 and then moved on to the things that have happened recently. Like what were some of the trends in technology that you remember like pretty vividly, like whether it be like everybody has to use a JavaScript framework, or it's like, oh, everybody has to use Kubernetes. Well, obviously, we'll talk about AI in a bit, but like, what are some of the visceral moments of technology that you remember?
I would definitely say there's a huge Solaris. I mean, there's a server where people used to sell servers, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's a different era. I don't know if people remember that at all. But then the people used to sell these servers. They used to sell JVMs, right? And all these IBM was a big thing, right? And then they used to sell licenses. License-based selling is very very much evident. And then that's one big area where people used to sell things predominantly. And then you can't purchase. You can't try as a developer. Your options are very limited. Either you work on. It's like having the big machine. You're a mechanical
Yeah.
engineer. You need to work in the factory to use that and learn. And thereby you are like an apprentice, right? And you
Mhm.
learn on the system to learn and then come back home and then you gain experience because all of this thing is vendor locked at some point. And then I learned more about open source. Open source is a very big revolution. I mean, I'm not talking about the Linux, which is like pretty much there all the time, but then that open source has come into every like applications area, right? You have JBoss and a lot of these tools and systems, not just the programming language, but then the tools also have started to become more open source centric. And that's one way that that cut through all the servers, licensing, and all. And then slowly we all know that there is cloud, and then and again cloud, and more commercialization of cloud, and everything that you need to compute, network storage. I briefly worked on VMware
Yeah.
systems at McAfee. And then I also worked on Hyper-V, very few people on KVM, and all of these hypervisor-based era, right? That everything is like pets versus cattle battle, right? You have one machine, now you have thin client, like you have VDA, so you have all of that stuff. That's like complete opposite to your servers, right? You buy 10
Sure.
servers, doesn't matter, by a hypervisor. And then that from private cloud to public cloud, which is like AWS and GCP, which still exists today, even. And then the digital transformation. I don't know if this is still a thing, or like or the transformation is done or not. But then 10 years or something, you see this cloud. And then again, I got myself into this open source side of things, and then I was there for the Kubernetes launch.
Yeah.
I was for the first when the Kubernetes was launched. I was there in one of the Google developer group meetups, I guess. And then I vividly remember the concept of pods. And then many people did not understand what does it really mean, right? Is this useful? So I remember even Brendan was writing a blog at the time, I think, about Kubernetes, how awesome it is, how you could orchestrate all these containers. Because a few weeks back, they were talk about mesos. Again, I don't know how many know about mesosphere. It's like a very big thing. Large telecom companies used to use, and then this scalability, unlimited scalability, much better than private cloud and things like that. So that's one era. I remember servers, private cloud, public cloud. And then I also remember blockchain, but I never participated somehow.
Sure.
The Web3 and crypto space, never, I did not even touch. But then I know that it was a thing,
Hmm.
the NFT and all of that. And I still have some wallets that I kind of like gotten because part of like the developer community thing. But then I think Gen AI is the thing that I know is the next big thing I see. And it's not just hype, there's some reality to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you just listed out all of the hype train things. I think this is a good time to kind of chat about AI a little bit, right? Like, so when was your like in when was the first time that you had really like come to contact with like AI from like a software development perspective?
Yeah. So I would say I was working at this company called McAfee, and where we were running data center anti-malware solution. And then there's a lot of data. I mean to say, not the customer's data, but then our agent, which secures these hypervisors, produce a lot of data about malwares. I mean, it's not like real threats, but then we also collect metadata. At some point, there is like this big data is a thing, but then having problems around organizing the large data. And then that's when ML came into picture, and then we did quite a bit of work on scikit-learns. I mean, different frameworks, different models, recommender systems. I would not say that it's fully productionized by the time I left. And then we went into EDR space, which is like endpoint detection and ranging, and
Yeah.
like it's called XDR now. And that's another, the SIEM and all of that area. But then that's the area, that's the time that I came across. I would still, at that point of time or few years before, even today, I would not loosely call anything AI. I would still call it as machine learning.
Sure.
But that's the science that I got attracted to at the time. I also did like a machine learning nano degree with Udacity. I mean, this is one of the courses. It's like a very small course that you would get to know, and this is for fun. And then it was really fun, where I learned about lot of like interesting math and that I left back in probably the teens or something. So so it was quite fun. And that's the area I would say, like, not AI, but then ML. But in the last few years, we are interchangeably using a lot of terms, right? Like generative AI, I would still call it a generative AI. It's not like AI. AI is still
Sure,
bigger,
sure.
use cases, etc.
Yeah, like the idea of it's funny that you say it's like AI versus generative AI, right? Because everybody, I think it's in technology, like if you're in the tech area, like you might know the difference between the two. But if you're like in the public world, like I don't think a lot of people really know what gen or generative AI means, right? Like I think that people just see ChatGPT or they see like their smart devices and like, okay, that's AI. But I think somebody in technology, like one of the things that I've always tried to do, probably not correctly, is like try to like educate people who really don't care about like these sort of things. Like really, it's not AI. Like it's just like a lot of checks and a lot of lookups and things like that. And people always look at me like, why are you talking? I don't really care. Like it just gives me a taco recipe or whatever. Like, are you very guilty of that too? Where like you try to like teach your family or teach your friends things that they really don't want to learn as it pertains to like technology trends?
Well, I try to at least say, for example, if there is something called deep fake, and I just want to explain case if there is something like an information or like misinformation or disinformation campaigns going on. I just wanted them like, there's a concept called deep fakes, and then this is how it works, and you or this is how your data can be used. So just beware. So I try to do that very often and with things like that, but then I voluntarily also like keep them away if they don't have any questions, if they think like, oh, my son works in this antivirus company, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that wrong. I work for an anti-malware company,
Yeah,
but then
yeah,
it's fine. Okay. I don't mind, right? So I'm okay with that. But then usually I try to explain if there is like a hazard or like a security thing. Uh, yeah. But then,
yeah.
but then I also want to point out, right? I mean, when it comes to this AI and generative AI, you also have this deep learning. And in generative AI, it's like subset of like the deep learning models, right? And AI
Sure.
is too high level. So for me, I can't even comprehend sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that we like, there are all of these different. I tried to do like a Venn diagram one time of like all these different concepts, and I got very confused very quickly. It's like, okay, what is that technically? Is that a Venn diagram or is that just a subset diagram? And I got very, very frustrated. And I think one of the things that I've tried to do recently is not go super deep into like AI concepts, like we were talking about a little bit before we got started. Is like I'm not very interested in the math, or I'm not very interested in like the underlying like how does this actually work. I'm more interested in like how does this all connect into, hey, there's a chat box, and I put in my want into the chat box, and it gives me the thing, or it does a set of things to get to do the thing that I ask it to do. Um, Obviously, I think one of the things that kind of changed all this is ChatGPT. Like, what was your initial thoughts when ChatGPT like first became really big?
So again, I want to take a step back. I've seen rushes for GPT-2, and then there were I did not get the access to the API right very early, but then I've seen a lot of friends trying it out, and then I used to generate HTML code and things like that. GPT-2 itself is like 100 or 200 million parameter model, and then it was really cool. So I when ChatGPT came in and chat the use case for GPT, this was there,
Mm-hmm.
but it's the combination of the right set of like parameters and then the knowledge compression plus the use case, right? The chat. So it both merged and came into well. And I realized that, but what's surprising is the way that it went into adoption. That was very surprising to me. I realized that, people would be able to use it because there are AI chatbots to some level, not to the generative AI level, but then pre chat GPT. But then what surprised me, like the way that people adopted and then they started to, that's the beauty of like working with users, right? How much ever you know, how much ever you think about, how much ever you are an innovator, it once it's out in the public, people will try to probably make or break it, right? And then for ChatGPT, it's that situation where people made something out of it very useful, and that's took off, and there's like word of mouth and insanely, and it's common even for other AI apps today. If you have something really that generates aha moment in the first few seconds, you have made it, and then I think you will obviously have a viral adoption.
Yeah, no, it is pretty interesting. Like how I've seen tons of applications of technology and how to market them to consumers. But for whatever reason, like just the chat box has been so successful now that like if you go to like any AI company, or any company that's building something on AI, it has to be a chat box, right? Which I think is very interesting. For a lot of reasons, but firstly because I just think that like I think we're all kind of synonymous with chat boxes, but just the ease of it. I wonder from your perspective, like what are some other applications like our entry points or user experiences for AI that not to say as good as a chat box, but like could bring like a similar viral moments. Is it voice? Is it something else? What are some of your thoughts?
I think, I mean, if you're looking at modalities, yes, I think all of them exist. Multimodal was one area where everyone worked until some point, and then I think all the models now have multimodal
Yeah.
capabilities. Now it can understand, see, hear, talk, and I mean things like that. Another virality is I believe that models do really well with a lot of rule systems, so like workflows and all. And then I guess with O4 kind of models, as you could see, it can effectively do much as tools. It can read, do many things. So the next step would be how does the model get more creative edge? How does the model or like these AI models and tools together can build something that's autonomous and that's not like oriented that we stitch together multiple experiences, but then if the model itself could do many things, which offer does, right? If you ask something, it does automatical web search, scrapes through internet, asks questions on YouTube, things like that, right? And then kind of like aggregates all that information and tries to summarize it with some grounding. So that's something more interesting in general as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's the area, like model plus workflows. It's like the tools, like it's like you're
Yeah.
giving it hands and legs to walk with a brain and a memory. So that's going to be the next viral. I mean, at least like the value gets more accrued and accrued. It's not as if plateauing, but then I think I still think that some of these newer models will have some more value that will bring in.
Yeah, no, I that's totally fair. So, and this leads me to kind of the where I'd like the most of the conversation to go is like you've been in this AI space, like you talked about, you were playing around with GPT models before like ChatGPT was very, very popular, right? Like I remember, like we were talking before we got started, like you and I worked at Elastic at the same time, and you were doing stuff in the ML/AI space, right? Um, and that led you to kind of what you're doing right now. You want to talk a little bit about what you're doing right now, the company you work for, that CodeRabbit, and what they do?
Yeah, sure, definitely. So at CodeRabbit, what we do is like AI code reviews. Yes, AI code is one area or a perfect application for generative AI, among many other use cases, like reading through PDF and then generating images, generating voice, and I think AI code is one such interesting area that will sustain and becomes as good as like developing applications, as good as databases, right? Every app needs a database. I think generating code out of these models and becomes as normal as it, because code has constraints and rules and it has a semantics and it's all well configured, right? The compilers and everything. There's quite a bit of thing that goes on, and these models are really good at understanding the rules, and so I think it's able to generate quite a bit of code, especially Python and JavaScript, because I think that's what is available in the open source and more other areas. So these models are really capable of doing AI code. And at CodeRabbit, I think we solve an interesting problem that's very different from doing code generation. And that's what excited me initially as well. Initially, I thought like, oh, I think it's just another code generator. No, as you see more and more code generators, like say there might be Copilot, Cursor, Windsurf, Roo, Klein, Eider, All Hand or Open Hands. There's thousand other code generation agents, right? Very popular ones, and each of them does really good job in a different play, right? Some might be good at keeping your flow state. Some might be generating good agentic solutions to you immediately. Lovable and Bolt does really good work on probably on the UI side. So there are several code generators, but one thing that you see as you generate more code, end of the day, you need to have a quality control, right? Even in if code generation goes industrial, like where we have a code servers and then you submit a plan and then or you give a issue and then it automatically plans out and generates the code. Somebody needs to pick up a sample from the batch. It goes back to my factory knowledge, right? Like I think and
Yeah.
see, oh, this passes the test. I think we could ship it to production, right?
Mm.
And this manual testing, right? And because you need to be able to do it at scale, and you also want to probably bring in certain sort of AI to reason around and do this thing at scale, because probably we are looking at billions of lines of code being generated every day, and if not like every hour at some point, right? So it's going to be like pretty crazy. So CodeRabbit comes in a layer. It has a very unique vantage point among all these code generators. It can aggregate and look at and review the code with an ensemble of models. It's not just one model or like two models. It does very interestingly does create context buildup or context enrichment as we call, and then which groups like 20 to 30 data points related to that particular PR or code that is coming in, and then each file is thoroughly reviewed with a bunch of static tools, code quality tools, code security tools, and then you give and the model still goes through like a verification phase. Like the review comments go through a verification phase through which you if there are simple questions, simple review comments, we generate some one-click suggestions. Otherwise, we pass on as a generic feedback. So this has been like quite a bit of success for CodeRabbit. And then as I see more rushes, like people keep telling us like hey, this is how it works, and people keep sharing these screenshots on the internet. I could not believe that the AI, along with all the glue that we pasted around and then built this AI agent, is doing so much wonders. And then this also plays an interesting like where your team is able to ship more
Yeah.
because your engineering team is velocity is not a problem, but quality is a problem, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
you're hitting that area. So how do you solve for quality is a bigger problem that we all are going to face, and it's already happening in several enterprises. So CodeRabbit perfectly sits in that area and does solve the code reasoning part, because code generation you would want the developer to be at flow state. Code review or code reasoning is completely different, where you need to reason around and think about whether is it needed or is this the way that you need to do. And there's a lot of science around it. It's not just like you pass a git and send it to a nicer prompt. There's more science around it, and I believe it's as good as like building a nice Starbucks coffee
Sure.
that
Sure.
doesn't like spoil your tongue.
Yeah. So a lot of that stuff resonates with me a ton, especially like you were talking about something. And I want to bring this into topic because I think it's very top of mind for people in tech. Like we are in this stage right now where there's a lot of noise around, oh, you have agents that can replace like developer work, right? And I think one of the things that is kind of not mentioned as much is, well, what kind of developer work it actually is, right? Because you mentioned like testing for quality of code. Like developers don't have issues with shipping code faster, in my opinion. They get bogged down with all of the other things that are required to ship code. Right. So they can write code pretty fast, but it's the reviews, it's the meetings, it's the CI/CD, it's the policies, whatever, like the intangibles that are in place, or intangibles isn't the right word, but the processes that are in place slow them down. So when we talk about code quality, um, what actually do you mean by code quality, and what do you mean by AI helping out with code quality?
Yeah, I think first of all, as Isaac you said, developers definitely want to be not distracted by a lot of like signals that come into play. And then while it's really important and helpful for the team or for the brand or the company, whatever they're shipping, right? Suppose if there's like an automobile company and then or they're shipping some feature into the car, and then I hope it doesn't affect the security or the brand or like the experience of the customer. So the buying decision depends on what the quality of that particular product is being shipped. So now definitely you need to also ensure the quality is good, but also like the developer ships faster. So which is like an at odds. It's initially proportional in a way in the world, in traditional world. But now with with the entire AI into picture, you're accelerating on one area, right? And then you're able to like accelerate on the other area your developers are not waiting on the code review or other tools, because they get instant feedback, and then they were able to improve the code. And then you're also like iteratively improving this code. You're not like thousands of issues and it goes into a tech debt, and then you are gonna fix in December in the holidays, but it never happens. So it's not like that, right? So you're definitely like making it more iterative, more simpler. You're also attacking vertical slice. So that's where AI developer and the developer and the management and everything comes together very nicely. And it's also not just for AI tools. If even if you don't use AI, I think the code review cycles are longer, as you know. And then this really helps putting this together like an AI code review tool, so you get instant feedback. Now, coming to the second part of the question, and what is this code quality? And then it's been like a $1 million question back in the day. Like, I write good quality code. I don't write bad code, right? As a developer,
Yeah,
we
exactly.
all say like, why would I write a bad quality code? We always want to write good quality code, right? So it's not about that. When you kind of like merge things together with your multiple teammates, there are cultures there, like people bring up their own way styles, and then probably organization would want to put together a specific bar, and then they might want everyone to normalize this for better maintainability, readability, and also like several other reasons, right? But then when you look at code quality, to me personally, it's not just for the organization. Personally, is maybe writing code that doesn't have a lot of code smells, and writing code that survives even if I am like not there in the same project forever. Writing code that if I come back and read it, we all have this, right? Short-term memory developer world, wherein you come back to revisit your code just after a month. I think you might not even recognize it. so so be able to really read, understand, and then recollect and what you have written. So it's not just writing clean code, better code. It's also being writing maintainable code, and a lot of that. Code quality means not just like running through static rules and being done with fixing variable names, and then fixing some issues. So maintaining a high bar of similar sort of trend. So it's as good as like participating in Olympics. So you are a great athlete. You always want to do better, and
Yeah.
then always want to deliver the best experience.
Yeah, and I mean this resonates with me because as a developer, like the most annoying part of my day is if I run into a bug and I have to figure out how to fix it. Like I enjoy that process a little bit until a certain point of time, and then it's annoying, right? Especially when they have run into a tricky bug that, it's just for whatever reason, like you make a change that you think it's going to work, and that causes something else in that process to not work as well, right? Like these are some of the things that, at least how my brain works, I have a very hard time thinking about the entire like flow of an execution. Um, and what's great about these AI sort of tools is that it can do just that. It can look at all of your code and determine like, oh, like if you make this change, it's going to affect this thing over here, right? So, I mean, from your perspective, like, what are some areas of technology that that AI can immediately come into and help? Like, I think that code quality is definitely one of them. I'm not as the full like replacing, but what are some areas that you think it like AI can come in and help as kind of like a side seat driver to a developer instead of it being a replacement?
Oh, fantastic! I think this is a great question, because we ourselves like do some of these, and then we found that these are great use cases where developers would really love to get help here. One of these use cases is like code documentation. See,
Sure.
we all at the end of the day, we are all like busy shipping and then writing things and doing all of that, right? But then you also have, if you have written an API and then if there is no documentation, you know that the parameters, you know what it takes. You need to put the pros. That's the only thing that it's and you might not have time in the busy scrum and the weekly sprints or like weekly sprints, etc. So AI comes to help really well. And then CodeRabbit especially does this doc strings where you could generate doc strings for every code change. But otherwise, like I have tried it out, general code documentation for some of those files, especially if it is like Python or JavaScript or like Java. I think for a lot of languages, it works fantastic. And then you could run your doc targets to generate the code documentation that can stay forever.
Yeah.
So that because you could have these models of the AI agents like CodeRabbit to have enough and then it is on autopilot. You don't need to worry about it. So that it's maintained. Developer also feels better because it's their code. Somebody is doing like a really like a job that thankless because it's helpful even for them to come back and refer. So that's and you could also like with AI, it's also like you can give special instructions on how to write code for special areas, and that would be really cool. Now, coming to this another use case, I think unit testing has been a pain for a lot of people. There are
Sure.
several approaches that folks advocate, like TDD, BDD, and etc. So, but also we all know like quite a few people do branch coverage or then functional coverage and they get the good green color scores in the coverage report or like the code coverage report. But otherwise, I think unit testing is one great area, and with agents and with code tools, I believe it's only normal for us to depend on unit testing. Every one of us, like, you need to write functional test cases, and then we're gonna become like SDETs, right? Software
Sure. Sure.
engineering for and then we write these test cases and we rerun these, and then AI codes those, and then we verify it for various parameters. Now flip the switch, you could also do the other way around, where you could also generate in your specific framework, have the basis of it, and then let the agents generate, and then you could also have multiple agents generate code, and then your unit test suite can validate all of that. So unit testing is one another area. And then I mean, you could also think of maintaining the large scale high system design documents and how the system is working. In CodeRabbit, we do these sequence diagrams. And for every change, you have a sequence diagram of how the change is interplaying with the existing code base.
Right.
So then what you have added. So similarly, I think you could have like a large system design document that's useful for architects, that's useful for your principal engineers, useful for your management, and also like onboarding or bringing somebody new to the team. So it's not locked within a tribal knowledge. It's also expanded and it's also shareable all across.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I think that, the more we can think about what AI can help us as developers with, I think the better. I think where we struggle is immediately think of it as like this thing that is going to like do a lot of the things that we enjoy doing. But you just listed off a few things that me as a developer or other developers that are listening to this would rather not do, and it doing them for us and it doing it more effectively and faster, which allows me as a developer to focus on the things that I care about doing, like solving these interesting problems, maybe putting together some interesting algorithms, what have you, right? Um, I'd love to get your thoughts as we're about to wrap up. Is like what is the next phase? Like I think right now, like we had this generative AI wave, and then we had this agent wave where I was talking a lot about, how to tell an AI to do multiple things, and now we're kind of in this wave right now where everything is a, model context protocol, MCP servers. Like, what is the what is the next thing? Like, what is the next thing that you see that you're hearing about that is interesting to you and something that we should be paying attention to?
Yeah, I think if you look at it that way, I would definitely say code generation, as you would have heard about from the build or the latest announcement that VS is gonna have like AI native features, right? VS Code is like a great editor. I really love it, and then now it's gonna also have a baked-in feature related to Copilot, so that it's as good as an AI editor. So code generation is not on the desktop side. I think we will do more, or like the real creativeness of developers earlier is like felt on an editor because the logic in a specific programming language construct. But then going forward, we have to write prose, and these are not prompts. These are like the same thinking that you do in an if else loop, or in a for loop. You need to put together in an issue. The next stage is writing great nicely articulated specs And then that doesn't mean that you become a product manager, but then you should be able to articulate. And then I believe code generators, there could be each developer can have their own pet code generator, and then or a cattle of code generator. And then you could spin up code, and then you probably set up some sort of like um, you know harness to validate them. And then I believe that these issue to PR pull requests. And then we have seen yesterday, I think there were 3 or 4 coding agents that were launched, like one from Google, one from Microsoft, or one
Yeah.
from itself, like Cloud Core, Anthropic has launched something. So there are a lot of these agents, that will the coding agents on the centralized area, like on your GitHub repository, on your CI/CD system. Like it could be a Jenkins plugin as well, right?
Sure.
So that changes the way that we are writing the code. It's a lot of habit change as well. It's not going to happen today or tomorrow. It's like a multi-year thing. So, and then there's also taste, right? Developer might write it differently.
Yeah.
So that's the next big thing. I mean, at least for the upcoming in the next few months, I see that a lot of people would be doing or hitchhiking around this area.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, I love that, and I think I think what the point that we're trying to make for anybody that's listening to this, like, man, they're talking about AI a ton. I think one of the things that's important for me to stress is it's so much more than just, hey, as I'm typing or ask it a question, generate a block of code for me. Like, there's so much more to be done in this space that is more impactful to developers. I'm not saying that gray text or fancy autocomplete is invaluable, but I think at the end of the day, it's about doing the things that are going to help us be more successful. We already can write code really fast, whether it's good code or not, that's up for discussion. Um, I think one of the things that I'd love to, as we, like I said, as we wrap up is, what are some other trends that you see in technology that may not be AI related? I think that right now, all of the emphasis is on AI, but you've been, like you were talking about at the beginning, you're talking about working about like doing things in Hyper-V and things in VMware and things like the virtualization space. And then you talked about going into the ML space and in the AI space. Like, what are some of the trends that you're seeing that affect developer teams that we should be paying attention to?
I think distributed systems is one area, and there's a lot of at least a lot of stuff that's happening in the distributed systems across the high performance computing. Because it's also like a tangent because of the AI wave. I think there's a bit of, like, as you said, the GPUs, and it how that infrastructure and high performance computing is having an impact. So that's translating to compute, storage, and network, even storage. There are quite a few advancement. I think there's this one conference about HPC back in the day, like in Atlanta some last year, and then this one coming up in Hamburg. So quite a bit of interesting stuff that's being discussed in the data storage, and then distribute high performance computing on these workloads. So it's exciting to see there are like some, I would not say side effects, they're having their own wave of
Sure.
sorts. So I think there's more interest happening in that area for sure, when it comes to, like, like at scale, how do you manage these consensus and things like that. So that's one area I personally find. And security always have something or the other new. Apart from AI, I think security itself is like a big area, as you know. And then I've seen some great updates on the RSA side recent. So pretty excited for them as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm very excited about technology and all of the non AI related things in technology, because I think as AI is taking up all of the attention, I think that there's some folks out there that are thinking about, like, okay, how do we add AI into our existing systems, but also how do we build our systems that are more robust to accommodate all of these AI things that are being built, right? Like you mentioned the security thing and the high performance computing. You talk about the distributed stuff. Like, all of this stuff is going to be more and more prevalent as AI tools and AI systems become more and more like required as a part of our daily lives as developers.
Yeah.
This conversation has been awesome. Did you have something to add?
No, I think it's been really great talking to you. I believe
Yeah.
we spoke about open source AI and a lot of stuff. I also want to say that there's quite a bit of open source in AI, and this is not like models. I want to say that there are great open source code generation extensions that everyone should definitely look at, like Roo, Klein, etc.
Yeah.
And there are great open source libraries and tools that help agents like CodeRabbit, for example, AST grep. So I mean, these are available, these are there, but then only few people know it. But then all of this are like really helping get better in many ways. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And this, like, what I love about this show is I get the opportunity to chat with folks for an hour about the things they find passionate about. And to your credit, you are very passionate about these areas that just so happen to be quite popular at the moment. So you're, one of those quote unquote subject matter experts, which I think is awesome to always talk with. So, as we wrap up, I think one thing that I would love to call out for folks that are listening is if you don't already follow Aravind and you'd like to learn more about some of the stuff that he's doing, there'll be some links in the show notes to both to him and to CodeRabbit and some of the things they're doing there. And one place to find him is on Twitter. You can find him at ARAVIND PUTREVU. And of course, there'll be a link to that down below of this show. So as we wrap up, my friend, do you have any parting words?
No, thank you for inviting me. It's been great talking to you. More than usual stuff. I think it did not go on like a podcast, and then we really discussed some in normal stuff. I think
Yeah.
not so heavy as such, but then so exciting. And would love to do it again. And then when you have time, we have more updates to cover. Maybe like in 6 to 8 months for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm always looking for opportunities to chat with folks that love technology as much as me, and you, my friend, are one of them. And I want to thank you for hanging out with me and for the folks that are tuning in live and the folks that are listening in the future. My name is Isaac Levin, and this has been Coffee and Open Source for my friend Aravind. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.